Serangan membabi buta yang diluncurkan militer Iran selama 12 hari membuat Israel merugi. Puluhan ribu bangunan rusak parah terkena serangan langsung rudal-rudal dari Teheran. Dikutip dari serambinews.com, setidaknya ada 31.000 bangunan hancur dan rusak berat akibat serangan rudal dan drone Iran. Tanya itu, 4.000 kendaraan juga dilaporkan rusak. Hal ini menunjukkan bahwa rudal Iran telah menimbulkan kerusakan yang sangat besar selama konflik. Sementara Perdana Menteri Israel, Benyamin Netanyahu, ini sekarang menghadapi tekanan besar dari warganya. Pasalnya, lebih dari 35.000 warga Israel mengajukan klaim ganti rugi kepada negara. Ribuan warga ini mendesak negara untuk ganti rugi atas kerusakan ribuan rumah, kemudian ada kendaraan dan properti. Tercatat sebanyak 38.700 klaim telah diajukan ke Badan Pajak Israel melalui Dana Ganti Rugi sejak 13 Juni. Di antara klaim tersebut, ini terdapat 30.809 permintaan ganti rugi bangunan, kemudian ada 3.713 permintaan ganti rugi kendaraan, serta ada 4.085 klaim permintaan ganti rugi peralatan dan barang lainnya. Belum ada pengumuman resmi dari pihak pemerintah maupun Perdana Menteri Netanyahu terkait total anggaran yang disiapkan untuk membayar kompensasi tersebut.
Ratusan serangan rudal yang menghantam Israel menyebabkan tekanan ekonomi berat bagi warga Zionis. Media Israel melaporkan sejumlah bangunan rusak parah memicu aksi pencerahan oleh warga di lokasi terdampak. Situasi kacau dimanfaatkan untuk mengambil uang tunai dan barang mewah dari apartemen serta pusat perbelanjaan yang rusak. Dikutip dari Al-Mayadin, pencerahan terjadi di Bandara Apartemen dan Azrieli Mall, jantung kota Israel pada Senin 30 Juni. Adapun barang yang dijarah berupa perhiasan, uang tunai, jam tangan mewah hingga barang elektronik seperti laptop dan kamera. Bahkan pakaian bermerek dari butik serta peralatan rumah tangga juga raib dari unit apartemen yang ditinggalkan saat evakuasi. Meski aparat dikerahkan di sejumlah titik, laporan warga menyebut keamanan belum sepenuhnya terkendali. Pemerintah Israel menyatakan kerugian akibat serangan rudal mencapai 3 miliar dolar Amerika Serikat atau sekira 10 miliar shekel. Angka tersebut meliputi kerusakan bangunan, evakuasi 9.000 warga, serta kompensasi bagi pelaku usaha lokal. Direktur Otoritas Pajak menyebut hal ini sebagai kerusakan terparah dalam sejarah Israel.
It's a real privilege to welcome you all to this fireside chat with one of the most influential and widely respected figures in global diplomacy, Dr. S. Jaishankar, India's Minister of External Affairs. Over the past few years, Dr. Jaishankar has emerged not just as India's top diplomat, but as a powerful voice on global stage, unapologetically asserting India's interests, reshaping traditional alignments, and articulating a confident vision of India's place in the world. We are absolutely thrilled to have him with us today for an open conversation on India's role in the world, the challenges ahead, and the lessons he has learned along the way. Dr. Jaishankar, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It's a great pleasure, and it's wonderful to see so many people here, so many good friends. So I'm in your hands.
So let's start. You have served under both Congress and the BJP governments, and you have played a pivotal role in shaping India's foreign policy, from the US-India nuclear deal to today's emphasis on strategic autonomy. Over this time, how has your worldview evolved? And how do you see India's place in the world today?
Well, I actually joined under a government which was known as the Janata Party, which was many, many years ago. Other than the Congress and BJP, of course, in between we had what were called third front or coalition governments as well. And I mention it because over many years, yes, India has changed, world has changed, and world views reflect those changes, both of ourselves, there's a self-perception there, as well as how you see the world. And if I were to sort of drill it down into two broad points, one would be that, today if you take let's say the top 5 economies. They are very different from what they used to be. If you were to use any metric of influence, it's quite different. So you had a rebalancing in the world, accelerated by globalization. And we are heading towards what most people would regard as an era of multipolarity, which is many centers of power and influence, and which are autonomous of each other and pursue their particular interests. So that's the global landscape. So where my worldview is concerned, I mean, in a way it would derive from what does India have to offer in such a landscape. And I think India does have to offer a lot, because one, we would be a rarity today in the world, a civilizational state, a society which can trace its history for thousands of years, and which still today is a nation state. There are very few like that anymore. Two, we would definitely have a lot to offer as not just as the most populated country in the world, but the largest pool of talent in a way, in an era where talent and human resources is going to count for more, the era of AI. I think we would also have something special to contribute to the world as a democracy, but as a very diverse society, a society which has valued its diversity and nurtured its diversity. And finally, because we are able to play the role of a bridge. I mean, these are not the easiest times in the world, but if you ask yourself, okay, how many countries are able to pick up the phone and talk to Russia and Ukraine, Israel and Iran, or the global north and global south? I would suggest to you there are not that many. And the fact that we are, a political democracy, a market economy, a pluralistic society, a sort of a voice of the global south, but we are not anti-West. We get along, we participate, we attend the G7 meetings. In fact, from here I'm going on to Washington for a meeting of the Quad, and from there I'm going on to a meeting of the BRICS. So I think that should tell you something.
That's great. So let's move to a topic that a lot of people in this room care about, which is the US-India relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The relationship between US and India has seen real momentum in the recent years, with some major highs, but also its fair share of friction, such as the recent trade and tariff situation to student visa concerns. Looking ahead, how do you see this partnership evolving over the next 2 years? And in your view, what's your vision for this partnership?
I would say, again, I say this over multiple administrations, but particularly for the last 10 years, 11 years. If you look at the trend lines in India-US relations, I think the trend lines have been very positive. Just think back over the last 5 presidents of America: Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, back to Trump. 5 very different presidents. And yet, at the end of every presidency, if you were to do a dipstick on India-US relations, you'll find it's better off than it was at the beginning of that presidency. And the trend line over the last 25 years has actually been very, very strong. Because I think there are structural factors that work for the relationship. That the economics, the technology, the human bridges, the education, the security, the energy, all these are today drivers of the relationship. Now, are there arguments, are there differences, are there episodes? Sure, it happens. It won't be for the first time. I mean, in fact, at every one of these presidencies, I can think of something which at that time was a friction point. I mean, I remember even the time when I was ambassador here. I mean, I literally came in a few days after we had a problem related to one of our diplomats in the city. And then I had to deal with 301 issues, with compulsory licensing controversies, with plans to sell F-16 aircraft to Pakistan. We dealt with it. So it's not, relationships will never be free of issues, even I would say differences. I think what matters is the ability to deal with it and to keep that trend going in the positive direction. Now, you spoke about trade. Yes, we are in the middle, hopefully more than the middle, of a very intricate trade negotiation. Obviously, my hope would be that we bring it to a successful conclusion. I cannot guarantee it because there's another party to that discussion. But no question, we do think today that trade, there will have to be give and take. Just like the US or people in the US may have views about India, people in India have views about the US too. And we'll have to find a kind of a meeting ground there. I believe it's possible. And I think we'll have to watch the space for the next few days.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to a topic that you've spoken a lot about, which is the Russia-Ukraine situation. India has drawn both praise and criticism for its stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and its assertiveness on the global stage. How do you balance India's national interest with global expectations, especially from the Western partners?
Well, it's one of those subjects where you are very tempted to say, I told you so. And why I say that is, 2.5, in 2022, when things were very different, when the public mood was different, when the debate was very different, we took the position saying, look, you're not going to be able to resolve this matter on the battlefield. That this is not, the era of war. That there has to be negotiation, there has to be diplomacy between these countries. And in fact, initially, frankly, that was not a very popular line to take. Even when people spoke about diplomacy, it was more that you gather a set of countries to castigate Russia. I mean, that was their right. But the point was, it was not very helpful to getting a resolution of the issue. Now the world has come around. I mean, I've been in Europe twice in the last month. And what I now hear in Europe is an interest saying, yes, we need to sit down and talk, and we need to talk the sooner the better, which is fine. I mean, that's the position we have advocated. We also feel they need to talk directly to each other rather than, take positions which are, in a way, posturing or signaling rather than actually getting down to the brass tacks. So, at some stage this is going to happen. Now, I'm not sure that this passage of time, very frankly, has been helpful to the West. In fact, I would argue that, the longer it has taken, in many ways, many more issues have come to the fore, which were not there a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So, but, that's water under the bridge. Today, we are quite willing to do anything we can to contribute to that engagement process. And in fact, in the course of the last 3 years, we've had fairly regularly, we've had conversations in Moscow, which we have shared with Kiev, vice versa. Whenever any other country or any other party has tried to do something, if we could be helpful to that process, we have done that. It could be on the grain corridor, it could be on fertilizer supply. The grain corridor was led by Turkey at that time. The fertilizer issue was led by the Secretary General of the UN. There was an effort to stabilize the nuclear power station in Zaporizhzhia. We worked with IAEA head, Mr. Grossi. So if there's anything we can do, we are willing to do. But for us, a common sense way is to negotiate a solution to it, because quite honestly, there's no other way.
With growing calls to de-risk from China, how is India positioning itself as a viable alternative for economic and strategic partnership with the rest of the world?
Well, we are positioning ourselves, quite frankly, on our own. Meaning for our own good. It is, to me, unthinkable that an economy which is the 5th largest in the world, which would definitely by the end of the decade be the 3rd largest in the world, not have a significant manufacturing base. Because if you don't have a manufacturing base, you're not going to get innovation and technology, which is a corollary of manufacturing. And if a country like us, with our human resources and talent, doesn't have that technology and innovation, honestly, we are wasting our human talent. So if I were to work this backwards, to me, in a way, our economic future and all the possibilities, when we speak about AI and you speak about EVs and you talk about space and drone and underwater, these are all within the realm of possibility. If we actually gear up to have the capability and the human resources, the trained human resources, and the culture of creativity and innovation to deal with it. So how do you do that? One, to frankly make the country easier to do business, which has been very much the focus in the last decade. To make it much easier, not just for business, but for people to live, ease of living. You de-bureaucratize, cut down the rules, the paperwork. Try to create a modern infrastructure, which has been very much the focus of our efforts here, and where, in a way, I would argue, where really very big changes have happened in the last decade. If you look at some of the numbers, and quite honestly, if one were to even look at the comparative state of infrastructure, I think there's a lot to be said for what is happening in India. In the last decade, we have built 75 new airports, which is about 7 airports a year. We are laying roughly about 10,000 kilometers of roads every year, about 4,000 to 5,000 kilometers of railways every year. If any of you who's been to India and traveled on a train, I think you would recognize the enormity of that transformation which is going on. If one even looks at education, at talent exploitation, I think again, roughly you've had 7,000, broadly speaking, new colleges and higher training institutions which have come up in the last decade. So there is a very deep churning which is taking place in India, much stronger capacities. Pretty much in any sector, if you look at the first 50, 60 years of what we did in India, and you look at the last decade, we managed to double. And there's a very broad estimate that I'm giving you. So we need to do all of that, because until you do that, you cannot emerge as a credible destination for global business. And you cannot then become part of the global supply chain. I think today we have reached that point. I see we have, if one looks at GCCs, really the explosion of GCCs in India today, and see the exports. I think GCCs today probably directly generate between $150, $170 billion of exports. or if one even looks today at how sort of relevant we have become to finding effective solutions in many areas. Digital public infrastructure would be one. Space would be one, where we would be globally competitive. Vaccines would be one. Pharma would be one. So you are actually seeing this emergence of India as a serious economic alternative. I accept that there is a lot to be done. I'm sharing this not to say. To me, this is a kind of a takeoff point which we have reached today, and we are very hopeful that there's much more that could be built on this foundation.
You mentioned that you're going to DC for the Quad meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be great to hear what your objectives are for the Quad meeting, and how do you see India's role evolving in the Indo-Pacific, especially amidst the growing tension between the US and China?
The Quad is a very interesting mechanism, partly because it was an international commitment which resurfaced during President Trump's first administration. So when one looks at what happened in whose tenure, this is certainly one where actually it was a new commitment made by the United States under President Trump. Okay. Now, there's been a lot of progress since 2017 when it was restarted. Again, it was interesting that the first international meeting of the Trump 2 administration started with a Quad meeting again. But it was on day one. In fact, Mr. Rubio had just got sworn in and we all walked into his office 1 hour later. Now we've given him some time to catch his breath, and we're going to be back there to see, to do a stock taking and look at how we should take this further. But there are a lot of issues that we need to discuss in the Indo-Pacific. Issues about maritime safety, security, issues about connectivity, issues of technology, issues of pandemic preparedness, issues even of education. So you have 4 countries, in a way 4 corners of the Indo-Pacific, who are actually who have decided that they have a shared interest in creating a stabler, more prosperous Indo-Pacific, and are willing to work in a very practical basis. And it's a kind of an equal arrangement. Everybody pays their fair share as you go along. That's very much today an acceptable way of working. So I think we'll get good results out of it.
That's great. And what about any specific remarks within the Indo-Pacific and with relation to what role India can play with the tensions between US and China?
Well, I'm not sure, there are certain realities of the landscape, okay? And one of them is that the relationship between US and China is not what it used to be. It has acquired a much sharper competitive edge. Frankly, where we are concerned, we look at these 2 countries and each one of them has made up its mind about how it views the other. Obviously, there'll be an element of tactics to it. There's a larger strategic view that they have of each other. We would look quite honestly to see in what way are our interests furthered in this landscape. I think in many ways you can see that we have very strong convergences with the United States. At the same time, we are China's largest neighbor. We share a land boundary. We want stable relations with China. They are a very large trade partner as well, a very imbalanced trade, but still a very large trade account. So for us, how to sort of steady the China relationship create an equilibrium that is fair to us. At the same time, how do you work the convergences with the United States and get the most out of it? I mean, that's frankly the way we would approach it.
So moving on, you've taken a strong stance on cross-border terrorism emanating from Pakistan. What is India's message to global powers and international institutions on this issue? And what diplomatic and strategic red lines remain with Pakistan?
This morning I was at an exhibition on terrorism at the United Nations. This was something which our embassy, our mission to the UN had organized. And the reason we did that, we had a number of ambassadors from other countries who were there as well, is because we believe that terrorism is actually a threat to everybody. That no country should use it as an instrument to further its policies, because at the end of the day it comes back to bite everyone. And if we take the view that one terrorist act or one terrorist organization or one sponsor of terrorism is justified here, or you give them a free pass or you underplay it, it can easily happen. In fact, it does happen in other situations. So there has to be, the message to the world has to be that there should be zero tolerance for terrorism, that there should be no circumstances, no excuse, no justification under which you would allow, support, finance, sponsor terrorist acts. Now, in our particular case, we unfortunately had an experience of this. The experience has been very intense for the last 4 decades. But actually it started from the time of our independence. If you see, within a few months of our independence, terrorists were sent into Kashmir with this idea that they are proxies and they are tribal invaders, and then soon enough the Pakistani army followed. So we have battled terrorism really intensively for the last 4 decades, and we've had some horrific cases. Everybody would remember the Mumbai attack, and where really a major global metropolis was, for a few days really brought to a standstill with attacks on a scale which could not be contemplated, and which particularly targeted foreigners, especially of this country. We've had an attack on our parliament, a parliament meeting in session with the intent of taking lawmakers and the people governing India hostage at that time. That it was foiled was a different matter. But do look at the dangerous intent and the risks inherent in an enterprise like this. We've had a string of these attacks, and we've now reached a point, and I think in many ways the Pahalgam terrorist attack on April 22nd, this sentiment in India that look, enough is enough. That we are, because the Pahalgam was meant, it was an act of economic warfare. It was meant to destroy tourism in Kashmir, which was the mainstay of the economy. It was also meant to provoke religious violence, because people were asked to identify their faith before they were killed. So we decided that we cannot let terrorists function with impunity. The idea that they're on that side of the border and that therefore prevents retribution, I think is a proposition that needs to be challenged, and that is what we did. So now bear in mind, these are not people who operate in secret. These are terrorist organizations who have the equivalent of their corporate headquarters in the populated towns of Pakistan. Everybody knows what is the headquarters of organization A and organization B, and those are actually the buildings, the headquarters that we destroyed. So we are very clear, there will be no impunity for terrorists, that we will not, we will not deal with them any longer as proxies and spare the government which supports and finances and in many ways motivates them. We will not allow nuclear blackmail to prevent us from responding, because we've also heard this for too long, that you are both nuclear countries, therefore the other guys will come and do horrible things, but you mustn't do anything because it gets the world worried. Now we're not going to fall for that. If he is going to come and do things, we are going to go there and also hit the people who did this. So no yielding to nuclear blackmail, no impunity to terrorists, no more free pass that they are proxies. And we will do what we have to do to defend our people.
India has been active in forums such as the G20 and the UN. What reforms do you believe are necessary in global governance institutions to reflect the realities of the 21st century?
It's interesting that you put G20 and UN together. And I'll tell you why it's interesting. Because before the G20 came, there was something called the G7. Okay, the G7 were primarily Western countries. Japan, for this purpose, was a Western country. Now, the G7 finally reformed. It reformed under compulsion. That when the global financial crisis of 2008-2009 happened, the G7 realized, G7, G8, because Russia was part of it then, they realized that they couldn't handle this on their own and they needed to expand it and bring in other countries, and that's how the G20 came about. Now, the UN Security Council today faces the same predicament as the G7, which is, if you look at the big issues of the day, actually they've not been able to do very much. You have what's going on in Gaza. You saw there's a war going on in Ukraine. You had this Iran-Israel stuff. You had the biggest challenge of the century in the pandemic. And I ask you, where was the UN in all of this? Nowhere. So if we are serious about keeping the UN relevant, which we believe in, it's not our case that the UN should be done away with. But the UN needs updating, UN needs refreshing. So if we are now heading for 80 years of the UN, it makes when the UN was founded, there were 50 members. Today there are almost 200. So think of it in any domain. If there's a quadrupling, if your shareholders have quadrupled, if your numbers of students have grown 4 times, if your employees have grown 4 times, how can you continue working the same way? It doesn't make any sense. But the G20 shows that it can be done. And we hope at some stage the UN, because I can tell you the majority of members want change. That the problem is a few who are blocking it, using arcane procedures and wanting, I think they're not even serving their own interest well, because what they are doing is they think they're protecting their interest, but they're harming the institution. So overall, actually, their investment is getting less value there.
Thank you for that. So last question from me before we open up to the audience. So it's a fireside chat, so a more personal question. From being a diplomat to a minister, your transition into public life has been quite remarkable. What have been your biggest learnings, and what advice would you offer to the next generation shaping the future?
Well, my biggest learning is the next generation has a lot of advice to give me. It's amazing today how interactive the world is. For me, really a discovery how interested people are in foreign policy. During the last general elections in India, as part of the campaign, I would go to what I would consider maybe 3rd level, 4th level cities and towns of India. And I was honestly taken aback at the level of interest in the world, level of understanding of what was happening, level of questioning about what we are doing, and I was quite serious. I get honestly a lot of advice, and sometimes very good advice about how we should be engaging the world. What to me, I take heart because as a student of history in a way, I've always felt that many of India's problems in the past, I'm talking of distant past, hundreds of years ago, 500 years, 600 years, maybe more, was we were impervious to the changes which were going on in the world. So it could be changes which happened in West Asia and the Middle East. It could be changes which happened when sea power, when Europeans were able to harness sea power and go about establishing their influence. So in a way, we kind of were engrossed in a world of our own and missed a lot of what was happening in the global environment. Today, I really, if you ask me, obviously as a minister, my primary responsibility is to secure my country's interests. But
Brigade Al-Quds sayap militer Jihad Islam Palestina menyergap unit infanteri Israel di timur Khan Yunis, Gaza Selatan pada Senin 30 Juni. Para pejuang memasang bom anti personel dan anti benteng di rumah tempat pasukan Israel berlindung. Kemudian meledakkan bom saat pasukan Zionis masuk perangkap. Dikutip dari Al-Mayadin, akibat ledakan itu menewaskan dan melukai sejumlah tentara Israel, memicu kepanikan di barisan militer pendudukan. Ketika bala bantuan datang, pejuang Palestina menghujani mereka dengan senapan mesin dan RPG hingga memaksa evakuasi darurat. Sementara itu, helikopter militer dikerahkan di tengah asap tebal untuk menyelamatkan pasukan yang tersisa. Dalam serangan terpisah, Brigade Al-Quds juga menghancurkan bulldozer D9 Israel dengan bom laras berkekuatan tinggi. Bersama Brigade Al-Qassam sayap militer Hamas, mereka menghancurkan tank Merkava dengan alat peledak takep di lokasi yang sama. Pasukan perlawanan nasional juga menargetkan base Israel di Abasan Al-Jadidah dengan bom yang telah dipasangi sebelumnya. Serangan kompleks ini menunjukkan kemampuan taktis pejuang Palestina dalam menggagalkan kemajuan militer Israel. Serangan ini disebut berhasil menimbulkan korban jiwa dan memperlambat laju militer pendudukan Israel. Pemimpin oposisi Israel Yair Lapid mendesak diakhirinya perang di Gaza yang telah berlangsung lebih dari 20 bulan. Ia menilai konflik ini tak lagi memberikan manfaat bagi Israel, justru memperburuk kondisi keamanan politik dan ekonomi negara. Pemimpin Israel itu juga menyerukan upaya perdamaian antara kedua negara. Dikutip dari Serambi News pada Selasa 1 Juli 2025, Lapid mengklaim bahwa militer Israel tidak memiliki tujuan yang jelas di jalur Gaza. Sebelumnya, Presiden Amerika Serikat Donald Trump mendesak Perdana Menteri Israel Benjamin Netanyahu menghentikan perang di jalur Gaza secara permanen. Selain itu, Trump memperingatkan Netanyahu tak menyerang fasilitas nuklir di Iran. Pihaknya menyoroti usulan baru dari utusan khusus Amerika Serikat Steve Witkoff soal gencatan senjata di Gaza. Menurut Trump, gencatan senjata selama 60 hari dengan imbalan setengah dari sandera yang ditahan Hamas bisa segera terwujud. Hal itu terjadi jika Netanyahu menyepakati kesepakatan tersebut dengan Hamas. Kelompok peretas Iran mengancam akan membocorkan data intelijen sensitif milik Amerika Serikat. Selain itu, mereka akan membongkar email para pembantu Presiden Donald Trump. Ancaman ini muncul setelah cyber Iran berhasil meretas sejumlah sistem keamanan milik lembaga federal Amerika Serikat. Mereka mengklaim telah mengakses dan menyimpan lebih dari 100 GB email dari akun milik pejabat tinggi Gedung Putih. Dikutip dari The Times of Israel pada Selasa 1 Juli, dokumen itu mencakup informasi operasi militer, identitas agen rahasia, serta komunikasi internal antar lembaga.
Di Indonesia telah ditemukan metode yang sepenuhnya memulihkan penglihatan hingga 100% hanya dalam waktu 48 jam. Seorang dokter mata asal Indonesia telah menciptakan minuman yang dapat mengembalikan penglihatan hingga 100% hanya dalam 48 jam. Sudah 5 juta orang yang berhasil memulihkan penglihatannya dengan minuman luar biasa ini. Dengarkan beberapa pengalaman mereka.
Minuman ini secara harfiah mengembalikan kejernihan penglihatan saya setelah 2 kali pemakaian. Saya tidak lagi memerlukan kacamata.
Setelah menggunakan minuman ini hanya sekali, penglihatan saya membaik dan saya bisa membaca tanpa kacamata dalam waktu 7 jam. Saya sangat senang.
Penglihatan saya membaik dari 3 dioptri menjadi sempurna dalam 48 jam. Sekarang saya tidak perlu memakai kacamata lagi.
Saya membuat minuman ini di dapur sendiri. Dan setelah 3 kali pemakaian benar-benar memulihkan penglihatan saya.
Saya sudah menderita penglihatan buruk selama 20 tahun. Minuman unik ini memulihkan penglihatan saya dalam 3 hari. Selama 2 minggu terakhir ini, penglihatan saya benar-benar sempurna. Saya sangat bahagia bisa menikmati hidup dengan penglihatan yang jelas.
Lebih dari 100.000 warga Indonesia telah memulihkan kejernihan penglihatan mereka hanya dalam bulan terakhir. Saya memberikan jaminan 100% bahwa penglihatan Anda akan sepenuhnya pulih dalam waktu 48 jam. Jika Anda ingin memiliki penglihatan yang baik seumur hidup, klik tombol di bawah ini sekarang juga dan segera tonton video tentang metode ini karena akan segera dihapus hari ini juga.
militernya terhadap Israel di Timur Tengah. Jika tuntutan tak dipenuhi, mereka mengancam akan menyebarkan seluruh data rahasia ke publik. Sementara itu, Jaksa Agung Amerika Serikat menyatakan kebocoran ini berpotensi memicu krisis diplomatik dan ancaman keamanan jangka panjang. Serangan cyber ini disebut sebagai balasan non-militer terhadap serangan Amerika Serikat di jantung kota Teheran. Aksi provokasi mewarnai laga sepak bola di wilayah Argentina. Hal itu terjadi menjelang laga antara klub Atlético Boys dan Atlanta di Argentina pada Senin 30 Juni. Para pendukung membawa peti jenazah yang dibungkus bendera Israel sambil melambaikan bendera Palestina dan meneriakkan slogan anti-Israel. Dalam rekaman yang beredar di media sosial, sejumlah pria berpakaian Hamzah terlihat membawa peti mati sambil diiringi yel-yel dan simbol pro-Palestina. Aksi tersebut ditambah dengan spanduk bertuliskan "Bebaskan Palestina". Dikutip dari Javid.com, insiden itu terjadi di luar Stadion Malvinas Argentina menjelang pertandingan. Sebagai informasi, Atlanta dikenal sebagai klub yang memiliki kedekatan erat dengan komunitas Yahudi di Argentina. Aksi ini memicu kemarahan publik dan komunitas Yahudi setempat. Sementara itu, organisasi Yahudi Argentina mengecam keras aksi tersebut. Mereka juga menuntut penegakan hukum tegas terhadap pelaku aksi provokatif. Meski demikian, laga tetap berlangsung di bawah pengamanan ketat untuk mencegah insiden lebih lanjut.
Pemukim Israel dilaporkan menyerang pasukan keamanan dan merusak kendaraan militer serta instalasi keamanan di luar pangkalan militer pada Minggu 29 Juni malam di wilayah tepi barat Tribunars. Menurut media Israel, para warga ini menargetkan komandan pangkalan Brigade Regional Binyamin di tepi barat tengah dan menyebutnya sebagai pengkhianat. Perwira ini termasuk di antara pasukan yang diserang juga pada Jumat malam saat mereka mencoba menghentikan pemukim memasuki zona militer tertutup di dekat desa Palestina Kaf Malik, menyusul serangan pemukim yang menewaskan setidaknya 3 warga Palestina. 6 warga sipil sendiri yang merupakan warga Israel ini ditangkap setelah bentrokan dengan menyerang pasukan militer Israel sendiri, Tribuners.
Jika saya meninggal itu dini besok, saya ingin setiap penderita diabetes, termasuk Anda, mengetahui hal ini. Lelah dengan sakit kepala, penglihatan kabur, dan terus-menerus ke kamar mandi. Segala yang Anda butuhkan sudah ada di rumah. Bawang putih, jeruk nipis, dan kulkas. Ada satu trik kecil yang bisa membantu Anda bangun hari Senin depan tanpa diabetes. Beri saya 60 detik untuk menjelaskannya. Segala hal yang Anda pikir benar tentang diabetes, semuanya bohong. Kelebihan berat badan dan kesemutan di jari bukan karena Anda makan terlalu banyak donat atau kue tradisional. Anda telah ditipu oleh mereka yang berbaju putih, yang membuat Anda tergantung seumur hidup pada suntikan insulin dan metformin. Untuk memahami skalanya, kalikan pengeluaran bulanan Anda untuk diabetes dengan 5 juta. Itulah jumlah rakyat Indonesia yang menderita diabetes setiap hari. Inilah bagaimana kimia farma K24 Guardian Indonesia
Atasan juga harus turun tangan untuk membubarkan massa ini. Nah, dalam pernyataan lain beberapa jam setelahnya, militer Israel ini juga mengatakan bahwa banyak warga sipil Israel yang membakar dan merusak lokasi keamanan yang berisi sistem yang membantu menggagalkan serangan musuh di dekat pangkalan tersebut. Sebagai pemimpin pemerintahan koalisi Israel, juga banyak yang mengutuk insiden ini. Perdana Menteri Israel Benyamin Netanyahu juga bilang dalam sebuah pernyataan bahwa tidak ada negara yang taat hukum yang bisa menoleransi tindakan kekerasan dan anarkis seperti pembakaran fasilitas militer yang bahkan dilakukan oleh warga Israel sendiri, Tribuners. Situasi ini juga semakin mempersulit kondisi pemerintahan di Israel karena di satu sisi sudah banyak masyarakat Israel yang juga mengecam aksi-aksi yang dilakukan oleh IDF, Zionis, dan juga Benyamin Netanyahu karena mereka trauma akan serangan 12 hari yang sebelumnya dilancarkan oleh Iran dan sudah merusak banyak fasilitas yang ada di Israel, termasuk juga Tel Aviv yang merupakan kota terbesar di wilayah Israel, Tribuners. Meski kesepakatan gencatan senjata antara Iran dan Israel ini sudah resmi diteken, tapi hal ini tidak kemudian membuat Teheran bernafas lega, Tribuners. Justru pemerintahannya tetap memberlakukan status siaga 1. Dalam keterangan resmi media pemerintah Iran, Panglima Militer Mayor Jenderal Abdul Rahim Mousavi ini menegaskan bahwa militer Iran tetap dalam posisi siaga penuh untuk menghadapi kemungkinan pelanggaran dari pihak Israel. Sikap ini sendiri diambil lantaran Iran hingga kini masih mempertanyakan komitmen Israel mengenai gencatan senjata yang sudah disepakati baru-baru ini pasca pertempuran 12 hari. Mengingat Israel sendiri kan, ya kita sama-sama tahu ya Tribuners ya, punya rekam jejak pelanggaran gencatan senjata baik dengan kelompok di wilayah Palestina maupun dalam konflik tidak langsung dengan Iran. Oleh karena itu Iran sendiri menolak untuk bersikap lengah atau sepenuhnya mempercayai bahwa Israel ini akan menepati kesepakatan kali ini. Militer Iran juga menganggap bahwa kondisi damai saat ini bisa sewaktu-waktu berubah jika Israel melakukan pelanggaran yang serius. Alasan tersebut juga yang kemudian mendorong mereka tetap siaga merespon secara cepat bila konflik kembali pecah. Tribuners, berbagai pasukan juga disiagakan begitu ya dengan menjaga militer dalam posisi siaga. Iran juga mengirim pesan politik ke dalam negeri dan dunia internasional bahwa mereka tidak akan tunduk pada tekanan eksternal. Tribuners. Masih soal isu internasional juga Tribuners, 3 roket ditembakkan ke wilayah Bandara Kirkuk, Irak Utara pada Senin 30 Juni 2025 malam. 2 diantaranya menghantam sektor militer bandara dan menyebabkan 2 personel keamanan terluka ringan. Seorang pejabat keamanan senior Irak yang enggan disebutkan namanya mengatakan bahwa 2 roket Katyusha mendarat di bagian militer bandara. Tribuners. Sementara itu 1 roket lain ini jatuh di kawasan pemukiman di kota Kirkuk, tepatnya di lingkungan Uruba dan menyebabkan kerusakan pada sebuah rumah. Masih menurut sumber yang sama, 1 dari 3 roket yang ditembakkan ini dilaporkan gagal meledak, Tribuners. Nah, Bandara Kirkuk sendiri ini memiliki sektor militer yang digunakan oleh sejumlah satuan, termasuk Angkatan Darat Irak, Polisi Federal, dan Hashd al-Shabi atau koalisi kelompok paramiliter pro-Iran yang kini telah bergabung dalam angkatan bersenjata resmi negara tersebut. Dari laporan kantor berita resmi Irak sendiri, 1 dari 2 roket yang menghantam area bandara jatuh di dekat landasan pacu, yang mana 1 lagi mengenai pemukiman warga di luar kompleks bandara. Sampai sekarang ini belum ada pihak yang bertanggung jawab atas serangan roket tersebut, Tribuners, dan Irak ini sendiri selama ini kan dikenal sebagai wilayah rawan konflik ya, yang kerap menjadi ajang perang proksi. Namun dalam beberapa tahun terakhir situasi keamanan mulai menunjukkan tanda-tanda stabil setelah puluhan tahun dilanda kekacauan dan juga perang.
Seorang dokter terkenal mengejutkan komunitas ilmiah dengan penemuan terbarunya. Ternyata gejala kelelahan, penurunan penglihatan, pusing, gangguan pencernaan, dan nyeri perut semuanya timbul karena satu penyebab saja. Dr. Tirta Mandirahudi menerima penghargaan atas penemuan resep sederhana yang bisa dibuat di rumah, yang memungkinkan untuk menyingkirkan semua parasit secara permanen. Dengarkan apa yang beliau katakan.
Jika Anda ingin sehat dan berhenti pergi ke dokter, berhentilah menderita masalah perut setiap hari, kembung dan diare, dan singkirkan penyakit seperti alergi, kulit gatal, masalah jerawat, bau mulut, kecemasan, insomnia dan depresi, masalah hati dan ginjal, risiko serangan jantung dan stroke. Maka Anda perlu mengetahui penyebab sebenarnya dari penyakit Anda, agar Anda tidak menghabiskan banyak uang untuk dokter yang tidak kompeten, pengobatan yang salah, dan mengonsumsi obat yang justru membawa Anda ke liang kubur, bukannya menyembuhkan. Pada tanggal 4 Oktober 2000, Pak, Kementerian Kesehatan membuat pernyataan bahwa penyebab tunggal dan diremehkan dari semua penyakit Anda adalah bukan sistem kekebalan tubuh Anda yang lemah, bukan gaya hidup Anda, atau bahkan genetika. Penyebab sebenarnya dari kesehatan Anda yang buruk dan semua penyakit berbahaya di dunia adalah cacing parasit yang sudah hidup di dalam tubuh Anda dan menghancurkannya dari dalam keluar. Ajukan 3 pertanyaan sederhana kepada diri Anda sendiri. Apakah Anda mencuci tangan 13 kali sehari? Apakah Anda yakin bahwa air dan makanan yang Anda makan bersih? Apakah Anda jatuh sakit kurang dari sekali dalam setahun? Jika Anda menjawab tidak untuk 1 pertanyaan saja, maka saya akan memberitahu Anda dengan kepastian 100% bahwa Anda terinfeksi parasit. Siapakah saya dan mengapa saya mengatakan hal ini kepada Anda? Nama saya Dr. Tirta Mandirahudi, Dan selama 13 tahun terakhir, saya telah bekerja sama dengan Kementerian Kesehatan untuk meneliti penyebab sebenarnya dari penyakit-penyakit yang mematikan. Secara statistik, 100% orang yang meninggal setelah usia 35 tahun memiliki parasit di dalam tubuhnya. Faktanya adalah obat cacing yang mahal seperti mebendazole, albendazole, dan pirantel tidak menghilangkan penyebab sebenarnya dari parasit, tetapi hanya meringankan gejala-gejala infeksi untuk sementara. Obat-obatan farmasi seperti racun melemahkan tubuh Anda dan menyebabkan kecanduan. Dan segera setelah Anda berhenti di resepsi, parasit kembali dengan kekuatan 3 kali lipat dan menyingkirkannya menjadi jauh lebih sulit. Alih-alih racun ini, solusi nyata untuk semua masalah Anda sepanjang hidup Anda ada di ujung jari Anda. Unsur unik yang terkandung dalam biji labu menghilangkan semua parasit dalam 17 jam, membuat sel kekebalan bekerja 3 kali lebih cepat, dan tubuh mendapatkan perlindungan 3 kali lipat yang efektif dari parasit selamanya. Kami telah merekam resep lengkap untuk metode biji labu dalam video pendek di bawah posting ini, yang berusaha keras disembunyikan oleh apotek terbesar di negara kita, sehingga Anda tidak akan pernah tahu bagaimana cara membasmi parasit untuk selamanya dengan aman, dan yang terpenting murah dan sepenuhnya anonim. Tonton video ini pada tombol di bawah ini sampai selesai dan Anda akan mengetahuinya. Cara mengusir semua parasit dari tubuh Anda dalam 17 jam. Mengapa biji labu belum pernah digunakan sebelumnya untuk mengobati parasit? Mengapa parasit berkembang biak di dalam tubuh? Cara menyiapkan metode biji labu di rumah. Klik pada tombol selengkapnya dan tonton video singkat tentang metode biji labu ini yang 7 kali lebih efektif daripada albendazole, pirantel dan mebendazole, dan 9 kali lebih murah.
Brigade Al-Quds sayap militer Jihad Islam Palestina menyergap unit infanteri Israel di timur Khan Yunis, Gaza Selatan pada Senin 30 Juni. Para pejuang memasang bom anti personel dan anti benteng di rumah tempat pasukan Israel berlindung. Kemudian meledakkan bom saat pasukan Zionis masuk perangkap. Dikutip dari Al-Mayadin, akibat ledakan itu menewaskan dan melukai sejumlah tentara Israel, memicu kepanikan di barisan militer pendudukan. Ketika bala bantuan datang, pejuang Palestina menghujani mereka dengan senapan mesin dan RPG hingga memaksa evakuasi darurat. Sementara itu, helikopter militer dikerahkan di tengah asap tebal untuk menyelamatkan pasukan yang tersisa. Dalam serangan terpisah, Brigade Al-Quds juga menghancurkan bulldozer D9 Israel dengan bom laras berkekuatan tinggi. Bersama Brigade Al-Qassam sayap militer Hamas, mereka menghancurkan tank Merkava dengan alat peledak takep di lokasi yang sama. Pasukan perlawanan nasional juga menargetkan base Israel di Abasan Al-Jadidah dengan bom yang telah dipasangi sebelumnya. Serangan kompleks ini menunjukkan kemampuan taktis pejuang Palestina dalam menggagalkan kemajuan militer Israel. Serangan ini disebut berhasil menimbulkan korban jiwa dan memperlambat laju militer pendudukan Israel.
Saya berasal dari Jakarta, tapi sudah 5 tahun tinggal di Amerika. Dan beginilah cara orang di sini menyingkirkan diabetes hanya dalam 2 hari. Orang Amerika tidak tahu apa itu insulin, metformin, atau glimepirid. Mereka tidak pergi ke ahli endokrin, tidak menjalani diet, dan tidak lari pagi. Karena mereka tahu penyebab sebenarnya dari diabetes dan bagaimana cara mengatasinya, sehingga dalam 2 hari saja kadar gula darah bisa kembali normal dan mereka bisa hidup tanpa obat sampai umur 110 tahun. Di Indonesia, banyak yang percaya bahwa penyebab diabetes adalah usia, keturunan, atau pola makan yang buruk. Tapi kenyataannya bukan itu. Seiring waktu, pankreas kita dipenuhi racun dan lemak, sehingga insulin tidak lagi bisa diserap oleh sel-sel tubuh. Akibatnya, gula darah tinggi, mulut kering, haus terus-menerus, tubuh lelah, dan kaki sering mati rasa. Seorang teman saya di Amerika memberitahu saya tentang ramuan rumahan yang sederhana dari kayu manis dan jahe yang bisa membersihkan pankreas dan memulihkan kembali sensitivitas tubuh terhadap insulin. Ramuan ini secara harfiah membuang semua gula dan racun melalui urin dan feses. Yang kamu butuhkan hanyalah meluangkan waktu 30 detik sebelum tidur dan 2 hari kemudian kamu akan bangun dengan kadar gula darah yang normal dan melupakan semua gejala penyakit mengerikan ini. Di bawah tombol video ini, saya sudah menyertakan resep video lengkap dan menunjukkan cara membuat ramuan ini di rumah untuk mengendalikan gula darah dengan segera. Klik tombolnya sekarang dan tonton videonya.
Dua 12 hari membuat Israel merugi. Puluhan ribu bangunan rusak parah terkena serangan langsung rudal